In this video, we will discuss the basic horseshoeing principles that are necessary for a person beginning to learn horseshoeing or a horse owner that desires to shoe their own horse where a farrier is not available. There's a certain degree of satisfaction of doing your own work, but we must recognize the limitations that are placed upon us by this kind of work. Certain specialty items, things that would require hot work, would need an experienced professional farrier. The tools that we need to do basic horseshoeing could be summarized in these that we have here. First, we'd want an apron to protect our legs from the work. We want a hoof pick to clean out the foot, a brush that we can use to clean the dirt from the foot. For trimming, we use these three tools: the hoof knife, a left or right-handed knife, depending on which person is, and this, of course, needs to be sharp. We want a pair of hoof nippers to trim the excess wall and hoof from the horse, and a rasp with a smooth side and a rough side. The rasp is used to trim the bottom of the foot and to dress the outside of the wall. A clinch cutter to cut the clinches, although this can be dispensed with by using a rasp to rasp the clinches off. We can use the smooth side of the rasp to take the clinches off if we do not have a clinch cutter. The nailing hammer should be around 12 to 14 ounces in weight for the beginner. A lighter hammer is okay for a person who's more experienced. The shoe puller or nail cutter is necessary to cut the nails and remove the shoe. Notice the difference in the hoof nipper and the nail cutter. The nail cutter has knobs on the end of the handles here, and it has a wider space between the rivet and the cutting jaw, and the cutting jaw is thicker on the nail cutter. Do not pull shoes or cut nails with a hoof nipper. Hoof nipper should only be used for nipping the foot, the nail cutter and shoe puller for pulling the shoes and cutting nails. A clincher is a good idea to have on horses that are a little bit sensitive, and when you first begin shoeing horses, it's easier to use a clincher to pull the nail over than it is to hammer clinch, as many professional horseshoers do. And then a tool that is handy and useful if you misdrive a nail into the crease of the shoe. This tool is used to stick down into the crease, called a crease nail puller, to pull the nail out if it's been misdriven. Next, we want to discuss shoe pattern selection. Horses have front and hind feet. The shoe on the left is the front shoe, the shoe on the right is a hind shoe. The front foot has a more rounded toe, rounded through the quarters here, and then turned in at the heel. The hind shoe is quite narrow in the toe, straight through the quarters, and quite straight at the heel. So there's a difference in the shape and perhaps even the size of a front and hind pattern. Generally, we can get by with more length on the hind pattern because the horse isn't going to come up and overreach and pull the shoe off. However, you don't want to go back too far because a horse coming behind this horse may pull it off, or he may wrench it under a root or a rock and pull the shoe off. Shoes are manufactured in front and hind patterns, such as these made by St. Croix, the extra easy shoe. This is an aught front pattern, this is an aught hind pattern. So we can buy them in a front and hind pattern. Machine-made shoes come with the nails already stamped in there and with fullering or with a crease here along with the nail hole. The fullering or crease is there to fill up with dirt so that we have dirt against dirt rather than steel against dirt. The more fullering we have, the more traction that we have. This is a rim shoe with the fullering all the way around and a concave inner edge here, which makes it a self-cleaning pattern. The self-cleaning pattern allows mud and dirt and snow to come out of the shoe easier than would out of a plain pattern such as this. This is a plain pattern in what is called the compromise pattern. In other words, there's no front or hind. The shoer flattens the toe out and rounds the shoe up for a front shoe, and for a hind shoe you flatten the sides and narrow the shoe for a hind shoe. So it's called a compromise pattern. It's halfway between a front and a hind. This is called a toe and heel pattern, which has a toe piece and heel cocks, and is preferred by some people for use of horses in the mountains. If we don't know what size shoe our horse wears, we can measure the old shoe or measure the horse's foot at its widest point, and then from the middle of the toe to the heel, and take those measurements with us when we go to the hardware store to buy shoes. Remember that the shoe is fit slightly longer than where the hoof ends, and so when we place this on there, we want to keep that in mind. If we're going to measure the foot and then go to the store, the foot will be slightly shorter than what the shoe will be when it's placed on the horse. But with those two measurements, we can get a pretty good idea of what shoe size our horse wears. Another consideration is how the nail fits in the shoe and what type of nail we should buy. We want a nail that will fit in the shoe when we push it down in the shoe, that it will lock tight. One swat with a hammer and that would lock tight in there. And we want one that will go up high enough to give good holding power in the hoof wall. So for shoes that are aught up to 1, we usually use a 5-city head nail. When we go up to a 2, or 3, we usually use a 6-city head nail, and then double aught and below, we often use a 4.5 nail. The nail should be able to fit into the shoe, drop down in so that we just have enough sticking up above the shoe to form a good clinch. If the nail goes down in too deep, it will become loose and the shoe will come off prematurely. We want it, the check or the trademark portion of the nail, to go down inside the shoe and just a 1/16 of an inch stick up above it to clinch and seat the nail in the shoe. We sometimes will mash these nail holes when we're shaping the shoe, and we need to open those holes with a pritchel before nailing the shoe on. We're going to start by trimming a foot, and then we'll proceed to shoeing one later. Here we have a small pony foot, hasn't been trimmed for a while. We start by putting the hoof pick in at the heel and pushing all the way down to the bottom of the commissure and then pulling forward. And that cleans the manure and debris out from the foot. Next we'll clean it out here on the sides next to the wall. And in this foot we can see that there's some thrush or bacterial infection in here on the sides of the frog. Frog is distorted and the sole is projecting here above the wall, which is undesirable. We would like to get the sole down so the horse is actually walking on the wall. And we also note that the heels are higher than the toe. This pony has been foundered some time ago, and so the heel grows faster than the toe. First thing we do is remove the sole that projects above the hoof wall, get down to glossy material. In other words, here we can see that this is flaky and exfoliating or coming off the bottom of the foot, and this is very glossy. When it gets down to the glossy material, that's time to stop. So that would be as far as we'd want to trim there. Now we want the wall to be above that, because the wall's going to carry the shoe, or the wall's going to be what the horse walks on. Next we'll look at the frog, and we can see that there's places here where thrush can catch in it, places where there are loose, ragged pieces on it, and we'll remove those, and that's all. We don't need to do an excessive amount of trimming on the frog, particularly of a horse that's being ridden in the rocks or in a ridden in the rocks or ridden on rough ground. So we'll just trim up the loose, ragged pieces and be sure there's no thrush in the bottom of the foot. Now, since we trimmed the frog down, that gives us a level to trim our heels to. So now when we take the hoof nippers and begin to trim, we have a level on the sole. Remember that we're going to trim
wall just level there with the sole. Now at the heel, we have a level because we're going to come right back and trim the level with the frog. Note as I use the nippers that I make overlapping cuts. In other words, I cut a half, then I rotate it on the inside jaw, another half cut, so they're making overlapping cuts. Much easier to guide the tool along, make a nice flat cut that requires a minimum amount of rasping. Now when we rasp, try to hold the rasp flat and not push it like this. This is a tendency, most beginners have a tendency to roll the rasp. You want to try to hold it as flat as possible. Rasp from toe to heel or from heel to toe. If we rasp in the center of the foot, we have a tendency to get too deep there. We want to have it as flat as possible when we're finished. Now we'll sight over the foot by holding the foot in a relaxed position for the horse, putting your head right next to the body, and sighting over the foot. And we would like to see a line through the bones of the cannon and pastern perpendicular to the bottom of the foot. This one is just a little bit high on the outside, so I'll remove a little bit more right there. That will give us medial-lateral balance. Another thing we're looking for is angle of the foot. When we put the foot down, we'd like to see the angle of the pastern, front of the pastern, equal the angle of the hoof wall. In this case, it's kind of dished because this pony has been foundered. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dress the wall, bottom part, so that it's parallel with the top part. The top part is ideal or normal. Bottom part has been flared out due to the founder. So we'll dress that off. And we can best do that by putting the foot up on a hoof stand and dressing the front of the foot. This is called dressing the hoof wall, whereas when we trim the bottom, we call it trimming the hoof wall. Notice that the rasp is parallel to the coronary band as I dress the foot. If you get it up like this, then you'll make cuts up in here that are very undesirable because you're not trimming that part of the foot or not dressing that part of the foot. You just want to dress the lower 2/3 of the foot. Okay, the last thing we do after we dress the outside of the foot is to bevel the foot at an angle here in order to round the edges. Because a horse that's trimmed without a shoe should be just rounded up enough that it's not going to break up and split. The finished foot then should have the same slope as the front of the pastern viewed from the side. And the foot should be collected, or in other words, dressed here around the outside so that we have a continuous line from the coronary band down to the outer edge of the foot. We pick the bottom of the foot up and we can see that it has a nice symmetrical shape to it where it was more elongated before. We have trimmed out all the edges here that would collect thrush, little frayed pieces, and shaped the frog so that it looks like a normal, ideal frog in a case where it's been distorted like this and had thrush growing in it. So now it looks symmetrical as well. And then the last thing we might want to do here is to trim the sole so that it is for sure below the hoof wall. So we want the weight of the horse to be borne on the hoof wall. So the hoof wall now is flat and even with the ground, but the sole does not touch the ground. So this would be the way we would trim a horse that is going to go barefoot without shoes. To pick up the foot, now we're assuming that we're using a horse that is used to being shod, and we don't have to worry about him wanting to pick his foot up. We'll just run our hand down his leg, pinch him here in the fetlock area, and he should pick the foot up. Slip the foot underneath and turn our toes in slightly and drop down, and that forces our knees in to hold the foot in position. We start the hoof pick again back at the heel, pull it forward, go around the shoe, loosen up the material. Now if we've got a shoe on, we have to remove it. We use the clinch cutter, place it against the clinches, and then cut them off. This can also be done by taking the foot forward and rasping off the clinches if we don't have a clinch cutter. To remove the shoe, we place the shoe pullers underneath the inside heel of the shoe so that we can pull the shoe toward the outside knee or leg. We go down and bracing against this knee. If you can't get that right, then put this hand underneath the foot so you don't put too much strain on the horse, and work toward the toe. So we just wrenching toward the toe a little bit at a time till we get to that side, then come over on this side and continue on working toward the toe until the shoe finally comes loose. Notice that I use the leverage of the puller by going like this. Don't try to pull up. You'll have a hard time getting the shoe off. When you take the old shoe off, you want to place it somewhere where it isn't going to get stepped on and the horse get injured from the old nails. So put it in your shoeing box or bag, or throw it away from where you're working. Okay, now that we take the brush and clean out the bottom of the foot here, if there's any loose tags on the frog, we might remove those, but that's all. Nothing else about this frog appears to be distorted or diseased, so we just have removed the loose tags, and that's it. Now, if this horse is going to be ridden in the rocks, then we want to leave all the sole protection that we can in there. So we take out a minimum amount of sole. All I'm going to do is take a little piece out right there to give me a place to set my nippers. So we're going to nip the wall right level with the exfoliated or the natural sole. Now, to determine how much to cut off, again, we know that the depth is going to be about that at the toe. How much should we cut off at the heel? We can determine that by looking at the side of the horse and deciding what angle the foot should be. We would like to see the front of the hoof be parallel to the front of the pastern. In order to achieve that, we have to trim more off the heel or more off the toe, because there's a joint right in here that causes this to tip back and forth. In this horse's case, he has a steep upright foot. We can pretty much trim the same amount off the toe as we do on the heel. Many horses, however, have a long, pronounced toe, and we would have to trim more toe and less heel to achieve this angle. Now we've decided how much to take off the heel. We know how much to take off the toe. Now we have to blend the two together as we use the hoof nipper. Start at the center of the toe, and we make our cut with a line perpendicular through the handles of the nipper to the bottom of the foot. Then I rotate 1/2 turn like that. So I'm just taking half a cut each time. I'm holding this handle, the outside handle, straight up and down, pulling the other one toward me, rotating the nipper, half a cut, half a cut, half a cut. And I'll do that all the way back to the heel. This takes a little practice to get that to flow and to move like that. But that's what we want to achieve. And then you go back to the toe, start again. The object here is to get that as flat as possible so that we do a minimum amount of rasping. Okay? Next, we take the rasp and go from heel to toe or from toe to heel and take out any rough spots that we may have gotten. Periodically, we want to take the foot and sight over it. And we do that by holding it in the position the horse likes to carry it, so it's nice and loose. We don't want to pull it out here at the side because then we get a false reading. Right here's where the horse likes to carry it, so that means we have to put our head next to the horse to be able to look at this properly and get a line down through these bones perpendicular to the bottom of the foot. Okay, in this case I'm just a little bit high on this inside, so when I come back with a rasp I will bear down more, cut right in that area. Notice when I'm using the rasp that this hand on the end of the rasp is doing the cutting. This hand is doing the cutting. This hand down here on the handle is just guiding the rasp. That's all it does. This hand does all the cutting. If you try to cut with both hands, particularly beginners have a tendency to roll the rasp, then the foot won't be flat, and it's very difficult to get a nice fit with a shoe. Now turn it around, go from heel to toe. Now this hand is doing the cutting. This one is doing the guiding. Sometimes on these it's easier to lean over to the side and just cut like that. But the point is, we want to try to blend it all together so it makes a nice flat surface, and then finish it up with the smooth side of the rasp. Take the sharp edge off so you won't cut yourself. Now it's time to sight it again. Okay, it's still just a little high right there compared to the rest of the foot. This horse is kind of toed in, and that causes some of that. It grows a little more that way, a little more on the inside. Okay, now I think we've got that quite level and blended in good. Notice that the sole hasn't been trimmed here at all. It's pretty much level with the wall right out as it comes out and blends out here to the edge of the wall, so that there's no weight whatsoever being borne by that sole. We trim the bars just here where they join the sole so they won't be broken off. If the horse happens to step on a rock, you see you could break that off. So we just trim that down flush like that. Now that foot is trimmed on the bottom and is ready for the shoe, except that the foot has been distorted in between the shoeings, and so we want to dress or rasp the outside of the hoof wall. So we need to do that first before we shape the shoe. This saves a lot of time when we're shaping shoes. So this foot is a little wider right here from this point in the center of the foot over to this point is wider from that distance than it is over to here. So I'm going to take a little bit of that off. That'll make the foot more symmetrical. There's more of the foot being pushed out in this area than there is in this area, so I'm going to take some of that off, and that will make the foot more symmetrical, easier to shape a shoe to, and it will grow more uniformly and be a better shape the next time we shoe the horse. If we tried to shape a shoe to this foot just the way it is right now, you can see that there are lots of bends and curves in this foot, and it would be very difficult. It's much easier to shape it if we can dress the outside of the foot and make it a more uniform, symmetrical shape before we go to the anvil to shape the shoe. Okay, now we're going to take this foot forward on the hoof stand and dress it up. You can put the foot on your legs if you like, but most shoers prefer to use a hoof stand to support the foot when they dress it. We're dressing it by holding the rasp parallel to the coronary band and bringing it around the foot to take off any flares or distortion of the foot that may have occurred between shoeings. Also, if there's a dish in the front of the foot, we'll take that out. But see, what we're trying to get is a slope that's the same from the top to the bottom of the hoof, all the way around. Then we'll take the sharp edge off. Okay, the finished foot will be dressed just in this lower half to 2/3 of the foot here, and it's a continuous line now from the coronary band right down to the ground. And we've made the foot more symmetrical, and we followed the line of growth from the coronary band. Now we're ready to shape the shoe. There are 5 basic shoe shapes. The names for these shapes have been given them by Scott Simpson of Walla Walla, Washington. A Norman shape is a normal, nice, rounded, symmetrical type of foot. See that on the front foot of many of our horses. It's very simple to shape a shoe to this type of foot. And a compromise pattern, all we have to do is round the toe out and close the shoe up, and it's the easiest of the shoes to shape. A spike is for Spike, the toughest kid on the block. A spike is square in the toe, straight through the quarters, and turned in sharply at the heels. This is the most difficult of the shoes to shape. A stubby is one that is very flat in the toe, rounded in the middle portion of the foot, and then comes in at the heels. Many stubbies are actually shorter than they are wide. That's the stubby shape. We see this on the front of many of our thoroughbred and our modern quarter horses. The spike we see on standard breds and Arabians, many horses that have a so-called boxy foot. The tag is the common hindfoot shape. Tag is for tag-along, meaning the hindfoot. It is narrow in the toe, straight through the forequarter, and then has the widest part of the foot here at the back third of the foot rather than in the middle of the foot, as in the case of the front shapes that we've shown previously. So this is the tag shape. Now the Ralph shape is a shape that is a combination of 2 shapes. So in this case we have a half of this foot is a Norman sort of shape, half of the foot is a spike sort of shape. This is a difficult type of pattern to shape, but it becomes much easier if you break it in 2, as we have done here. Also in the Ralph pattern, it's important to note that the widest part of the foot is usually in the back third rather than in the middle as it is in the front pattern shapes. You can see Ralph feet on both the front and the hind feet of horses, and we see them most commonly on horses that are base narrow or base wide, because the uneven weight distribution distorts the hoof capsule in this manner. This is the Norman shaped foot. It's rounded through the toe, rounded through the quarters, straight back here at the heel. It's a symmetrical, rounded, normal shaped foot, and so it's called a Norman shape. This is a spike shaped foot. You can see that the toe is almost square, very straight through the branches, through the side here, and then turned in sharply at the heels. So this would be a spike shaped foot. This is the stubby shaped foot. It's very broad, flat in the toe, real rounded through the quarters, and actually almost wider than it is long. And so we call that the stubby shaped foot. It's almost round or even flattened round. This is a tag shaped foot, a very common shape on the hind feet of horses. Narrow at the toe, straight through the branches, the bend back in the back third of the foot, and then straight back to the heels. This is a Ralph-shaped foot. Ralph meaning that it has, it's half of one shape on one side, half one shape on the other side. On this side, on the inside here, we have a very flat shape, much like a spike. That would look just about like a half of a spike shoe. But on this side, the shoe is shaped very much like a tag shoe. In other words, it's straighter through here and the bend is back here. So it's sort of a tag spike combination, and we call that a Ralph. It would take our shoe that we've decided is the right size for the foot by the length of the heel and place it on the foot to see what needs to be done to it. This foot is a Ralph shape. It's flat in the toe and very flat on the inside, so half of the foot is kind of a spike shape. The outside of the foot is pretty much a Norman shape in this case. So the outside of the foot almost perfectly symmetrical with the machine-made or the keg shoe. The inside is going to have to be modified considerably. We can do that on an anvil by just flattening it in here and bending it up at the toe, or we can use a pocket anvil or portable shoe shaper. I'll do this process both ways to demonstrate them. We'll start with the anvil. Now we have made a mark here on the anvil which represents the width of the foot. Measure the width of the foot, put a mark here on the anvil so that when I get the shoe to the correct width, I can check it here and I don't have to walk back to the horse. I know that the outside branch now fits pretty much the lines of the foot. The inside branch has to be modified. So in this case, I'm going to bring it over here to the heel of the anvil and hit to flatten it. Now I have to bring it in from the toe so I can come up through the hardy hole and make a bend right at the toe. So it made quite a sharp bend right there at the toe. Now I need to bring in the heel, and I can do that right here as well. Now I checked against my mark, and that's the width of the foot, and so that saved me a number of trips to the foot. Now I'll walk over and check it on the foot. Now on the foot I can see that it fits very good along the inside, fits good along the outside, but this heel seems to need to come in just a little bit. It's there where it might get caught by the horse, where this one is okay. The inside heel seems to be okay. This one needs to come in a bit. So we'll go back to the anvil, put it up through the hardy hole just enough to turn it in. And then, since we know now that the shoe fits the horse, we'll just hit around the inside edge to make sure there'll be no sole pressure and to help level up the shoe. Each time I pick it up, I'd lay it on the anvil, sight over it, to be sure that it's level. Here I can see this heel is dipped down slightly here, so I need to hit it once right there to bring it up level. Okay, now the shoe is ready to apply to the horse. This is a portable shoe shaper called a pocket anvil. It can be taken apart and carried on a horse and packed or placed in your pickup or vehicle, and gives you a way to quickly shape shoes at the horse. Remember, the horse we're shaping for now, the outside was okay, the inside needed to be flat. So we can place it in the shoe shaper here like this, flatten the inside, just as we did on the anvil, and we need to turn this in from this point down, so we can put it up here like so. Get a sharp bend right there, just as we did on the anvil, and then turn in the heel. Notice that there's no noise. It takes a little physical strength and weight to sit on the handle here to get it to shape. But once you learn how to do it, it's very rapid and very accurate way of shaping shoes. So I turned in the heel just as I did on the other shoe. Now to check the width, I put a little ruler here on it so I can check it. It's not quite narrow enough. The other one was 4 5/8. Needs to be shrunk an 1/8 of an inch. So I can put it here on the back. Let's see, I'll turn it around so you can see it. And just close it, just that much. And now check it again, and that's pretty close. I might have overdone it. If I overdo it, I want to open it back up, put it there like that, and I can open it back up. If I have bent one branch or the other, I can level it by placing it like this. This is especially useful if you lose a shoe and it springs one heel. You can put it in this tool and straighten the shoe enough to get it nailed back on. If the shoe becomes warped in the shaping process, which frequently does occur, then you have to go to the anvil or some heavy steel block to level the shoe up. And now this shoe is ready to nail. See, there's no place there to catch. And it's flush at the toe and around the side, so we know we're going to get good nailing up into the hoof to hold the shoe on for the... If there was a little excess, let's say there's too much shoe hanging out over in this area here, so it's hard to get our hoof pick in, then we could take an old rasp and file that inside edge of the heel off, like this. So we can't get a hoof pick in, we can put it in a vise, take an old horseshoeing rasp, knock the sharp edges off, and then we can also bevel the outside edge. This lessens the chance then of the horse reaching up and stepping on it and pulling it off. Now, before we nail the shoe on, we set it up on the foot and check it again for fit. The outer perimeter of the fit seems to be okay. Now we tip the foot forward and make sure that both heels fit tight against the foot. If the shoe rocks like this, then that means there's a high spot that needs to be eliminated. We can do that on the anvil by hitting it here and smashing that down. This heel then will come down. Or we could take the rasp and take the high spot out. If it's a small height difference, as it is in this case, then we can just take that out with a rasp. When the shoe fits on there solid, you can hear it. It just goes on there and doesn't rock, and there's no gap underneath the heel. Now, a very important point when placing the shoe on the foot is to look at this point right here, this center point of the frog, about a ½ inch back from its point. And that then becomes the center of the foot. In other words, we don't want the shoe this way. We don't want it slidden this way. And we'd like to have more shoe behind that dot than in front. In other words, we don't want a shoe up like this. When we set the shoe on, too, to see that it's oriented properly, we use that dot to help us to see whether the shoe is square. We don't want it to be tipped like this or like this. We can also use the bulbs of the heels. So the bulbs of the heels of the shoe should be matched up. Shoe right against the toe, fitting right flush against the sides, matched up with the bulbs. That helps us to know the shoe is square on the foot. Then we take our nail, put it on the inside hole, or in other words, opposite side from the hand that we're using. If the right hand's holding the nail, and is in my case, I use the back of my hand to hold the shoe flat while I place the nail in this hole. So the first nail I would drive then would be the inside heel hole here on this foot. I start it in like that. Start in with soft blows and then finish it with hard blows to force the nail out. Then the nail is pulled up level and wrung off. On the nail there is a little bevel. The bevel's on the same side as the check of the nail, so that always is facing the center of the foot. If I'm on this side, the bevel and the check is facing the center. If I'm on this side, the bevel and the check is facing the center. This bevel forces the nail out. I aim the nail at the height I would like it to come out. I would like these nails to come out about 3/4 to an inch up the wall. So when I place the nail in the hole, I actually aim the nail at that point that I want it to come out. Okay, I've placed my outside hole here, or my first nail hole. If the shoe happens to slip, put it back in the proper position, check again the fit, and then come over and place the opposite heel nail hole, aiming it right at the point I want it to come out. Right there, it's aimed at that that position, soft, and then a couple of hard ones, and that pops it right out the side of the foot at the point that I would like it to emerge. Then I take my hammer, catch it with a claw, and pull it up so that it's coming out at a right angle, slide the claw on it right next to the hoof, and give it a turn like that, and that cuts the nail stub off. If your hammer has poor claws on it, then take the hammer and pull it up like this and slap it down against the foot like that, so that you don't have that waiting to cut you, run into your leg, and injure you if the horse happens to pull away from you. Then I just rotate back and forth, one side to the other. Notice I'm using my finger here as sort of an indication. You don't want it there, of course, when you hit the hammer. Have it away when you hit the hammer, but then you can put it back and tell. Now that one I can tell is coming out just a little too high. So I will pull the nail, take a new nail, and bevel the tip slightly, more than it normally is. Now when I put it back in that same hole, start it up there, and give it a quick hit like that, it comes out at the proper height. It's a good idea to set the shoe on the ground or set the foot on the ground and look at it before you progress much further after you've put a couple of nails in. There's what happens when you bring the hammer too far away from the wall. It causes the nail to ring further out, and it makes it hard to clinch. Much better if you do it right next to the wall. I'll pull this one out and demonstrate that again. Here's the use of the crease nail puller when you have one in all the way and you want it to come out. Switch hands, come up, pull it out straight, put the claw right next to the hoof wall, then ring it off. Whoop, too high, didn't come out. So pull that one out with a crease nail puller. Put a little more bevel on the nail. Go back up in the same hole and hit it hard, and it comes right out at the proper height. Okay, now after we've got all the nails in, we're going to block the nails. We can use the pull-off or the edge of the rasp to block the nail over. Just a couple of hits is enough. Just enough to seat it. In the shoe and to turn the nail over slightly. One. Okay. One. Okay, if a nail hasn't been wrung off and you just turned it over, first thing you have to do is cut all your nails the same length using your nail cutters or your pull-offs. The next thing I like to do is take my clincher and make sure they're all bent out at right angles to the wall. So I just pull them out, just slight, a little bit like that. Then take the rasp and rasp them all the same length. And when you sight over the top of the foot, you should look down and just see a 1/16 of an inch of nail sticking out of the foot. Then take the rasp and just come underneath the nail, right up to the nail. When it gets to the nail, then tip the rasp slightly like that to point the edge of the clinch. We've rasped underneath the clinch and sharpened each one of those clinches now. Now we take the clincher and start here with it parallel to the bottom of the foot, squeeze the handle, and that starts to turn the nail over. Now to push it into the foot, then we take the second bite and push it in. So 1 comes down, 2 pushes it in. And we have a nice smooth clinch there that won't catch the horse or catch our hand. Okay, now again we'll demonstrate turning over this nail. It's been sharpened and the groove has been rasped underneath it now. Now we'll put the clincher on there and that starts it, that turns it. The second pull pushes it into the wall. And there it is, flush. Another one. That's it. Now once you've done that, then you take the fine side of the rasp and just rasp there below those clinches, smoothing them up further into the wall. And I usually take the rasp and go around the edge, but it's not necessary. And we want to have that smooth enough you could run your hand over it and it wouldn't cut you. Now, the same thing as before, we'll take the clincher and make all the nails bent over the same amount, then rasp them all the same length. Then cut underneath each one. Be careful not to wrap your rasp like this, because that puts a line in the hoof wall. Just go straight back and forth right underneath the nail, and then bring it up and sharpen the nail. Just like that. Okay, then take your clincher now in 2 moves. We're going to go down, in, down, in, down, in. And then take the rasp and just finish up by rasping underneath any wall that's underneath the clinches, and then lightly pass over the clinches, because we don't want to weaken them and destroy their thickness and their effectiveness. And when we're done, it should be smooth. The nails should be about 1/3 of the way up the hoof wall, or they can either be parallel to the shoe or they can be parallel to the coronary band. Now, in this case, we've got them parallel to the shoe. We'd like them to come out 3/4 to 1 inch the way up the hoof wall, and in strong wall. In other words, we don't want any nail holes where there's old holes or a broken out or cracked piece. And that then should hold the shoe on for the period between shoeings, which averages somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks. Okay, after we've pulled the clinches over, we finish the foot by taking the rasp and lightly rasping underneath the clinches and lightly over the clinches so that it's perfectly smooth. We would like to be, when we're finished, we'd like the clinches to be square and flush with the wall and secure and good solid horn, not where there's old nail holes or cracks or parts that would be weak. We'd like to see the shoe right underneath the hoof wall around the edge here as we place our rasp on the sides of the hoof wall. So in other words, there should be a straight line from the coronary band to the shoe.
After the horse is shod, it's probably appropriate to talk about how we would maintain this job between shoeings. Every time you ride the horse, you should pick the feet out and check the shoes to see if they're still sound and tight against the foot. Be sure that there's no thrush infection inside the foot or puncture wounds that you might miss otherwise. Or perhaps a rock could be caught in the foot. If you do have an injury of that type, then you could take the shoe off, put a pad on between the shoe and hoof, and drive the nails right back in the same nail holes. And put your hoof dressing of some type in there, medication. About the only thing the hoof really needs to maintain itself is some water periodically. If you live in a very dry climate, you can overflow the water tank on your water trough, and that would be about all that would be needed. Feed the horse good food, and supplements to grow the hoof or hoof dressings to maintain the hoof are really unnecessary with proper care. One of the things that may happen between the intervals of shoeing is that the horse may step on the heel of the shoe or catch it in wire, spring the heel or bend it down, and cause the shoe then to be unstable on the foot and easily be loosened and come off. In order to correct this, we should cut the clinches on the nails and pull the old nails out of the hoof, knock them out of the shoe, then level the shoe on the anvil or with a portable shoe shaper, and then put the nails back in the same nail holes, if possible,
put it back on the foot. If a part of the foot is missing, then we may want to drive a nail in a different sound horn, or just leave that nail out, because the shoe will stay on even with a couple of nails if it's applied to a flat foot and a flat shoe. That's the important thing to maintaining a shoe between intervals. If you choose to hire a professional to do your shoeing, the following guidelines will help you identify a competent farrier. The preferred farrier can: 1. Balance the horse's feet. 2. Fit and apply shoes securely to maintain soundness. 3. Discuss foot problems and solutions with the vet. 4. Follow the client's or vet's directions. 5. Make and apply corrective and therapeutic shoes. 6. Make and keep appointments and exercise self-control. 7. Manage a sustainable business. And 8. Assist the client in evaluating the whole horse.
For over 3 decades, people have been turning to Butler Publishing and Farrier Services for sensible solutions to equine soundness. Known internationally for his ability to communicate complex ideas simply, Doug Butler skillfully guides you through easy-to-understand instructions and clear, step-by-step demonstrations that make learning quick and easy. Individual and small group personalized training is available for highly motivated persons seeking to advance their farrier skills. You can trust the Butler name for high-quality, continuing education resources. Choose from these many fine products.
The Principles of Horseshoeing 2, the most widely used farrier textbook in the world, is the ultimate training tool available today for farriers, veterinarians, and horse owners alike. The companion hands-on study guide will help you fine-tune your skills with a sequential home study course, as well as valuable preparation tips for certification exams and continuing education. Shoeing in Your Right Mind is a widely acclaimed book that helps you assess conformation, achieve foot balance and shoe fit, increasing your efficiency in horseshoeing by using the powerful visualization techniques of the right side of the brain. Horse Foot Care describes common foot diseases and offers suggestions for quality, humane hoof care in easy-to-understand terms. To Shoe a Horse is a companion video that demonstrates common hoof disorders and how to treat them with sensible shoeing techniques. Many farriers use these tools for client education and practice builders. The Basic Horseshoeing Principles video is for beginning horseshoers and horse owners. It demonstrates trimming, shoe styles and shapes, cold shoeing, nailing, clinching, and horse foot maintenance. A Horse Behavior Modification Techniques video is also available. And so I place it like this. And that way the fingers put it there and hold it in place until I can get it with a slight amount of tension on it here. We don't want the thing really tight. We want it just enough to divert his attention. The bones and ligaments of the horse's leg video makes horse leg anatomy easy to understand. Front and hind limbs are assembled and discussed as you watch. The Dissection and Common Foot Diseases video focuses on the nature and function of the lower leg and common problems caused by neglect. The Horseshoeing Iron and Forgework 4-tape video series is a comprehensive shoe forging skill mastery clinic. The Specimen Shoemaking 5-tape video series shows you the most efficient forging techniques for creating various handmade shoes worn by various horse breed types. The Therapeutic Shoeing 2-tape video series demonstrates solid practical solutions to a dozen common horsefoot problems. And then I put 2 Duratrack nails in here, which are boreum tipped nails on the head. They have boreum on the head, and that prevents the toe from wearing out and also kind of rocks his heel back. The Shoeing the Foundered Horse and Shoeing the Navicular Horse videos address these specific foot problems in detail. Keeping horses sound is what farriers do best. The Shoeing the Sound Horse video demonstrates the fitting and nailing of machine-made shoes and introduces the construction and evaluation of handmade shoes. The Shoeing the Draft Horse video demonstrates construction and application of handmade shoes to the draft horse foot. Okay, that's a more nearly correct fit, but I don't really have enough heat now to set it the way I want it. Oh yeah, it's okay. Made a mark clear to the top of the clip, which is what we want. Personalized one-on-one training is available for highly motivated individuals desiring coaching in advanced farrier techniques.
Remember, when you want the very best books, videos, and advanced farrier training programs, call Butler Publishing at 1-800-728-3826. Butler, the name you can trust for high-quality learning experiences.